Word on Sports. First American Bank's 4th down on 4.
Welcome into the show. The Saints watched with interest today the NFC divisional matchup between Dallas and Minnesota. The winner would head to New Orleans next week. So who did Houdat's root for? After all, the Cowboys snapping the Saints' 13-game win streak in the regular season. But the Vikings had been a playoff albatross around the franchise's neck for more than 20 years. Minnesota unbeaten at the Metrodome this season, hoping to cap off a perfect 9-0 mark with a win today. First quarter, Brett Favre, a perfect toss to Sidney Rice. Tight coverage, but not tight enough. 47 yards, 7-0. Vikes with an early lead into the half. Tony Romo sacked 6 times today. Fumbles the football on this one. Vikings recover. They'd get a field goal and lead by 14 at the break. Favre and Rice, their third hookup of the afternoon, a 45-yard touchdown pass. 27-13, Vikings well in control. They'd add a late score for window dressing and win 34-3. So the Vikings, it will be next Sunday in the Superdome. Brett Favre, the story could be recited by just the average football fan now, a native of Kiln, Mississippi. His offseason spent just an hour and a half up I-59 in Hattiesburg. His second comeback, crossing paths with the team he first rooted for.
All the years I pulled for the Saints, and I told Sean Payton that way back when. He and I have talked periodically, and I think he's done an outstanding job, but I told him, I said, secretly, I'm a Saints fan. And we didn't think we were going to actually play. I mean, there was always an outside chance, but go figure. It's the Superdome. I don't think too many people down there will be compassionate that I'm with the Vikings and coming in, and they've waited a long time for it. But that's going to be a factor that we have to handle.
We're joined now in studio by Brian Alley Walsh. 23 years he's been covering the Saints. You can read his latest stuff at neworleans.com. First off, thanks for coming down. All right, forget about the matchups on X's and O's. I'm talking about the most intriguing matchups. What kind of it maybe generates the biggest headlines? And you got to think it's got to be this Vikings game, wouldn't you? I mean, you got Brett Favre. You've got the history between the Saints and the Vikings in the playoffs. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Just the idea of Brett Favre going against Drew Brees. You got two quarterbacks that live 75 miles from each other, not even that. The idea that Brett is coming back home to a place where he won his only Super Bowl in 1997, Scott. So I mean, that's one backdrop. But you got really you've got the two best teams in the NFC meeting for this NFC Championship, and then moving on to the Super Bowl. The Vikings have played 49 years of football. They have never won a Super Bowl. They've been there 4 times, Scott. Yeah. Saints have never been there yet. So you've got some futility streaks that are going to, hopefully one's going to snap here, and hopefully it's the one for the black and gold.
And there's one really unique one, the Saints' very first playoff game, which you covered in Minnesota. They get blown out, and now there's a chance they can make their very first Super Bowl by, beating Minnesota. So
well,
I think you've got the correlation there.
That first Minnesota game was actually here in the Dome.
Oh, okay, right.
In fact, the Saints were hosting a wild card game. They had Minnesota coming in, and they got blown out. I remember, I think the Saints opened up with a touchdown, Scott, ended up getting beat 44-10. So it was
2000 they go up to
correct,
Minnesota, right? Yeah.
So, they have had some history with Minnesota. And, when you watched the game this afternoon and you watched which team would be a better opponent for the Saints, I kept vacillating. I kept going back and forth and going, I'm not sure who is the best team to come in and play for the Saints' purposes, I mean, the Vikings are loaded. They've got a great defense. They did a number on the Cowboys, and I was not one of those people who thought that was going to happen at all.
Well, I think that you've got to look at the commitment that Minnesota had to the run. They weren't having a lot of success with it, but they still did it. Adrian Peterson, 26 carries, 63 yards, 2.4 average. Yep. And I think that shows, and if there is a weakness with this newly healed Saints defense, I think it is maybe run defense. Right. Would you agree?
Well, I would agree, and it's been their Achilles heel for most of the season. This team did a great job against Peterson a year ago, if you remember. Now, they lost the game, but they did a great job against him. And, up until today, and I'm not sure how effective Adrian was. I know he got some tough yards, but a lot of teams have been playing 8 in the box against him, and they've been holding him down pretty good for the last second half of the season. And you pick your poison here. Do you stop Adrian and make Brett beat you? And I think that's what teams have been doing. but Brett has protected the ball all season long.
I think that's what Dallas tried to do today, and it really didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, the Cowboys are out of the playoffs. The Saints still rolling along. The 24-hour rule in effect. They've had 24 hours roughly to go back and kind of celebrate their win. Juan Kincaid on how they can keep that celebration going.
Running down the near sideline, Graham won't even contest him. Bye-bye birdies. Good for 83 yards. Red G, Red G, Red.
Saints players warned us all last week. They said don't get caught up with how they finished the regular season. Yesterday, we all saw why.
I don't really think anyone in this locker room ever lost confidence in what we were capable of doing, and just win 13 games in this league by accident. So, we knew the formula, and it was just a matter of putting it together for 60 minutes.
There's an accountability person to person that, we will refuse to let each other down. And when you have the high stakes of the playoffs, it's easy to get motivated and go out there and give 100%, and that's usually enough for this team to pull out a win.
What we saw in the Dome on Saturday was a direct result of what took place on and off the practice field in the 2-week build-up to yesterday's game. Some rest and relaxation, followed up by a training camp approach to practice, complete with a couple of days of contact, produced what we witnessed yesterday. But as Reggie Bush said after the game, big-time players still need to make big-time plays in the big-time game, and few did more than 25.
A few months ago I told them, you just keep chopping the wood and keep working hard, and you're too explosive of a player. And yesterday, he had good energy, good effort, and really made some big plays for us to help us win.
But he wasn't the only one. Did you notice how the Saints took the fight
to go out there and make sure that we're physical and that we are doing what we can do to make sure we provide the fans with what they deserve.
It's something that we've tried to maintain all year. Obviously, with injuries here and there, it's been tough. But I think everybody knew what we had to do yesterday and knew that we had to be the most physical team.
So now the Saints are back in the NFC Championship game, second time in 4 years. But Drew Brees said, obviously, this has a totally different feel than 2006.
06 was something that none of us had ever experienced before. I had never been to an NFC Championship game. A lot of guys hadn't. And so I think, the expectations going into 06 were just, hey, let's just worry about winning one game, and then let's worry about winning the next one.
Now the feelings are a lot different because the trip to the Super Bowl will be decided in the Superdome, where unlike Chicago in 2006, the temperature gauge can be adjusted, where the footing will be true, and the home field advantage will be an advantage for the black and gold.
This team's a lot more mature than we were 4 years ago, and I was just telling some of the guys that it's also a situation where, Reggie was a rookie 4 years ago, so was Marcus Colson, so was Jerry Evans. These guys are 4-year vets now, so to have that maturity level going into this big game here at home, it's a completely different feeling.
Our approach to the playoffs this year was that we're preparing ourselves to make a run, and it's not just, hey, we're just happy to win the first game in the playoffs or even win the NFC Championship. I mean, we've got the ultimate goal, in mind.
With the Saints, I'm Juan Kincaid, 4th down on 4.
Back with Brian Alley Walsh, NewOrleans.com. I liked how Sean Payton handled the bye week going into it. Obviously, it was successful. Now it's going to be interesting compared to 06 how he handles the build up to this NFC Championship game. Not having that travel day will be something new for him.
Absolutely, and in fact, we talked about it prior to the end of the season when he was talking about how he didn't mind taking his team on the road to Carolina and how sometimes you can avoid distractions and stuff. He's going to have to do his best job of keeping this team focused this week because there's going to be beaucoup distractions. You're going to have national media in town. You're going to have a lot of fans and friends clamoring for extra tickets, and stuff like that. And in addition to handling just your local media and stuff like that. So
you think it helps with Brett Favre on the other side? Will that maybe take a little bit of that attention away from the Saints? Because that's probably the big national story.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly, here's a guy that's coming out of his second retirement, and brings the Vikings back into the NFC Championship. I think about the Saints, and you go, they seem to prosper. In my opinion, they seem to prosper when they're the underdog or when they're flying under the radar. And if you notice how well they play, and I think they do better when it's us against them. And Peyton does a great job kind of allowing that thing to percolate. You know,
Yeah.
it is us against the world, guys. You know, nobody's giving us a chance, and you can feed off that, and you can go a long way with that kind of mentality.
No, he said he's kind of got a pulse on his team, he believes, and he trusts the way that he wants to handle it. He does, and it worked out well. It worked out well against the Cardinals. Stay with us. Much more with Brian Ali-Walsh as we kind of look at Reggie Bush's day, and can he have another huge breakout game against the Minnesota Vikings? Stay with us. You're watching 4th Down. Still ahead, Reggie Bush wowed the crowd yesterday at the Superdome, how his record-breaking afternoon started and ended. Plus, much more with Brian Ali-Walsh when 4th Down returns.
Here's a run left side, and it's Reggie Bush breaking free. Bush to the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Well, it's not every day a grown man gets a post-game kiss from his head coach, but when you had the kind of day that Reggie Bush had Saturday, single-handedly scoring as many touchdowns as the other team, a little affection just expected. Here's Juan Kincaid.
On Friday, Deuce McAllister stole the headlines. Today, Reggie Bush stole the show. From the time he took the field, Bush had a feeling, an inkling that this could be his day in the Dome.
You know, big-time players make big-time plays, you know, in games like this.
Wielding a big stick, Bush set out to let his actions do the talking.
He played like a slugger. I guess you could say that. Made a lot of big plays. These types of games are the games you live for. You know, as a football player, as an athlete, as a competitor, this is what you work all year long for.
It's certainly the kind of game we've come to expect from number 25. On this kind of stage, one where a special player can make all the difference. Head coach Sean Payton certainly recognized this during the week.
I challenged him just in regards to, you know, him being healthy in the postseason. And he's as healthy as he's been, and he was something today.
And Bush took his head coach's words to heart. He said this was by far his best postseason game ever. The numbers would suggest he's right, with 217 all-purpose yards. But it's how Bush went about getting those yards. In a game where the Saints wanted to be the more physical team, Bush was by far the most physical.
Yesterday, just about being the most aggressive team for 60 minutes. And, you know, Coach Payton handed out bats to the whole team, and on the bat it said, "Bring the wood." And basically all that meant was just be aggressive and the most physical team on the field today for 60 minutes, and I tried to do my part.
Punt return for 6, the first time he's done that since 2008.
We've been saying all week that we thought that he had a chance to pop one if we just blocked on that punt return. And this is what you like to say, vintage Reggie Bush.
He played well for him today. You know that he's a threat, and you try to do the best you can to contain him. But when you get into the open field and, once again, you miss a tackle, then he made us pay for that.
I think there were plenty of other people who wanted to give Reggie Bush a kiss after yesterday's game. His importance and kind of what he can do, I think it's lost in the shuffle what he can do for this team, you know, when he's getting held back or when he is injured. But this is a very dynamic offense and very dynamic special teams when he's healthy.
Well, you know, I think the Cardinals, it seemed to play into Sean's play calling last night, Scotty secondary. And boy, I'll tell you what, you know, Ken Wisenhunt said it great about Reggie, is that if you give him some space, get him the ball out in space, this guy, what he does with his legs and his ankles and his feet and the way he moves and shifts his body around, he needs to be as healthy as 100% to 100% as he can be.
And I think, though, we saw you can put 5 wide receivers out there all you want, but if you can't give your quarterback any time, much like Tony Romo had today, you can't get anything done. The offensive line played masterfully yesterday, but I want to look really at Jamon Bushrod, who's been very serviceable this year against a guy like Jared Allen. That's going to be something that everyone's watching.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, Jermon, they all did play well. I mean, if you look at some of the breakdowns of blocking from the back and stuff, Jared Allen's a Pro Bowl. He's one of the elite pass rushers in the league. He's going to probably need some help. You know, you're going to need a tight end into the chip, running back to chip or something, you know.
And you're hoping Shockey's 100, probably not 100%, but you're hoping he's not limping as bad as he was.
Yeah, here's I think the key is simply this: is if the Vikings can put pressure with 4 men and drop 7 all the time, it makes it more difficult for Drew to find his target.
Yeah.
Okay, and they've done it. They're real successful at. Excuse me. They're real successful at putting 4 people in heavy pass rushing, and if the Saints can keep them out and give Drew time, then you know, it's going to be a great game.
And the Cowboys were never able to get that running game going, to get any type of balance going today. And I think that, you know, you saw it yesterday. The Sean Payton didn't mind. He kept to it. He established that run, you know, early and late when he needed to.
Well, remember last season, this was, we always felt, I mean, everybody felt, fans, media, everybody, probably his wife, that felt that he just got away from the run much sooner than he perhaps should have. And I think if and he's been honest with us, he'll tell you, you know, that he did probably on occasions last year. And he's got the running backs to stay with the run, you know, this year. He's got the confidence in the running game, and it shows in the way he calls his game.
Without a doubt. I'll be anxious to see what kind of ploy he uses this week to keep his team going. You never know what is going to happen. You know, maybe he re-signs Bobby Hebert to lead the team out. Who knows?
Just real quick, Sky, there is another side note to this game, the Star Cap game.
That's true.
You know, I mean, you've got Charles Grant is out now because of the injury, but you've got the two Williams guys on the defensive line for the Vikes and Will Smith. So interesting.
Deuce on
and Deuce, that's right. That's
Good point. That'll be some. Good luck getting some quotes on that this week. Brian Ali Walsh covers the Saints for NewOrleans.com. We always appreciate you coming down.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Stay with us. We look at the other side of the NFL bracket when we come back on Fourth Down.
All right, thanks.
Saints fans picked up their gold doubloons this afternoon, the latest perk from the team for season ticket holders who are getting all kinds of questions from their friends these days.
How do I get tickets? Are you using your tickets this weekend?
If you want a ticket, you can try to buy one on the street and hope it's real, or you can try the internet. The Saints recommend you use the team's ticket exchange site.
You can do it at your home. You can just print them right there, and it prints a barcode, cancels out the old barcode. So it's the only safe and reliable place to get a ticket for this weekend's game.
Now the most important part of your search, the cost. On the Ticket Exchange website, we found tickets starting a little over $300 each and running as high as $1,000. Right now, there are well over 4,000 tickets available for the upcoming game. Remember, the ticket owners could raise or lower their asking prices depending upon interest this week.
You can name any price you want. It's a fair market value.
And yes, Minnesota fans will be allowed to buy tickets. Every team will get an allotment. And normally, if a visiting team's fans don't buy all of their allotment, the remaining tickets will go back to the home team. But the Saints say don't expect that to happen. In this case, they do expect Vikings fans to buy all of their tickets. Back to you.
I'm sure they will. Thanks a lot, Kurt.
And may we now dispense with the notion that resting starters with playoff seeding already assured compromises the integrity of the game. May we now cease any debate that starters should play in meaningless games, risk injury, and be deprived of a physical and mental hiatus in order to simply go through the motions in defeat. How important was home field and a first-round bye to 3 of the 4 teams who had them? Well, both the top-seeded Saints and the Colts, along with the second-seeded Vikings, playing at home with a week off to rest and prepare, won one-sidedly. The Saints and the Vikings, the 1 and 2 seeds in the NFC, were both playing at home after a week off, and yet, given the way that they had finished the season in unimpressive fashion, with the Vikings losing 2 of their last 3 to sub-500 teams and the Saints losing their last 3, the fans of those 2 teams were probably the most nervous of the 8 teams playing over the weekend, given the impressive way their opponents in the Cardinals and the Cowboys had won the previous week. And yet the combination of rest and relaxation, preparation and proximity, home field and home cooking produced the 2 most dominant victories of the weekend. The Saints and the Vikings won by 31 points each, by a combined score of 79-17. Now, the fans of both the Vikings and the Saints are reassured that their teams have cast aside recent problems and have restored previous prosperity. The fans of one will have that notion reinforced next Sunday in victory. The fans of the other will have that notion shattered in defeat. For those of you lucky enough to be a part of history, to be in the Superdome for the first NFC Championship game the Saints have ever hosted for their first Super Bowl berth in franchise history, nothing is guaranteed for you on the field. But for the Saints on the field, one thing can be guaranteed by you in the stands. They can promise you nothing, but you can promise them something. The most raucous, enthusiastic, intimidating, sustained atmosphere any visitor has ever experienced in NFC Championship game history.
On the road to the promised land in Miami, it's a promise you can keep. And if in doing your part, the Saints are even more inspired to do theirs, you will share in the historic accomplishment when they do. Our web chat comes up at 6:30. Bradley Handwerger and myself taking your calls.
We need it loud, more decibels than even Saturday.
You were there Saturday. How loud was it?
It was loud, and we're going to make it louder.
Good.
It's important, Jim.
It was great.
Okay.
The more I can say, first down, Saints, that means we're winning.
Jerry Romig is used to being around a crowd. This time he visited our Metairie studio at the same time some Cub Scouts were here. But Romig usually aims a much larger crowd as the public announcer for Saints games. While the team's dream is to go to the Super Bowl, Romig's job ends Sunday because the NFL supplies the announcers for Super Bowls.
It's my zenith. Sends chills up my spine, really. It's we've waited so long.
For Jerry Romig, the wait started in the 1960s, calling Saints games at Tulane Stadium. Wins were scarce back then. But Romig says things really got scary after Katrina, until New Orleans' emotional low led to a new high point.
To top the Atlanta game, you know, coming home from Katrina, was up until now was the highlight.
Romig says he'll be at the Super Bowl as a spectator, and he'll be back calling games for the world champion Saints next year.
God willing, I'll be there. It will be my 42nd year.
How long do you want to do it?
How long the good Lord gives me a voice.
And so Jerry Romig will be in Miami as a spectator, he expects, but for him, the ultimate goal as an announcer at the Superdome is to call an NFC Championship game. That's exactly what he's going to get to do against the Vikings. Back to you guys.
Can't wait for that to happen. Right. Thank you, Kurt.
Well, there'll be endless breakdowns this week of Vikings versus Saints. Junk all the rest. Remember this: if the Saints protect Drew Brees, they win. Minnesota's run defense is outstanding, number 2 in the league. Minnesota's pass defense is suspect, 19th in the league. 19th in the league despite being number 1 in the NFL in quarterback sacks. Sunday, the Vikings had 6 sacks of Dallas quarterback Tony Romo. 6. All season, the Saints offensive line has prided themselves on being one of the top units in the NFL. We'll see if they live up to that moniker Sunday night. To the Saints offensive line, I say, show me something, mister.
Should be a good one, huh?
A great one.
What's your prediction?
You know, I'm going to go with the home team, but I think it's a very shaky vote because Minnesota has a outstanding team with 9 Pro Bowlers. But in a championship game like this, got to go with the home team.
Meacham, Shockey playing Sunday?
Those are 2 very big question marks, whether they play and whether they're 100%. And I'd say, I don't know about that.
All right, we'll see. Thank you, Eddie D. We'll be right back.